I want to talk a little bit about the setup that I'm using whenever I'm flying FPV, because there's a bunch of different things that I've tested out as I started, because the first drone that I highly recommend to anyone that's starting out as a beginner FPV pilot is the DJI Avata. But when you're moving up to a different system, then it might be kind of hard to know what you should purchase and what you should go for and why you should choose the different products that I'm using. The main RC controller that I have is a TBS Tango 2 Pro. This is a very good controller. One of the reasons that I like this so much is because the travel distance of the gimbals are way longer than what it is on the DJI FPV. When I was using DJI FPV, I always felt that it was very hard to get those smooth flights, and that is something that I haven't experienced with this, because the travel distance is longer, you get more precise control and movements, and it just feels a lot better, and you have a better grip on the actual gimbal sticks as well. Whenever I'm practicing in the simulator, it's a good thing that this thing has USB-C. You can connect a USB-C cable to your computer. I'm using a dongle from USB-C to USB-A, and then USB-A to USB-C into my computer. I don't know why, but that is the case. But it works just fine to use this as a practice controller for FPV flights. And if you're not willing to invest into the entire system all at once and you just want to test the waters, I think that this controller comes in at $209 including taxes, and it's one that I highly recommend. You have a couple of different switches here as well that you can use, and it's using the Crossfire system. So make sure if you're buying this controller that your drone also have a Crossfire receiver when you're purchasing that. The DJI goggles too are incredibly high-res goggles, and when you're flying with an FPV drone, you want to make sure that you see most of the things in front of you, because sometimes it just goes so quick, so it's like I've crashed a couple of times. But these have a high resolution, and for someone like me that have a vision impairment, it's also very good because they have diopters here on the bottom, so you can adjust according to how you want things to look in your goggles, and that is crucial when it comes to flying. And just remove that, put that on, and then back if you lose visual line of sight, or if you need to fly visual line of sight, it's very easy to just flip them up. I found them to be very good. The battery life is close to a day full of flying. I haven't tried to unload them, but I've found them to be extremely useful, extremely lightweight, and all in all a good build. When it comes to the antennas on the goggles, I have True RC patch antennas. I purchased these mainly because I wanted to have better range with my FPV drone, and I've found these to be a little bit better than the original antennas when it comes to VTX, which is the Vision Transmission System, and how it transmits to the goggles. The biggest issue is not the receiver and the remote. The biggest issue is usually what you see in the goggles. I can highly recommend these if you're looking to purchase some different antennas for your setup as well. When it comes to batteries, there's a bunch of different ones. I am personally flying with 6 cells, and these batteries are usually called 6S. The total battery capacity in these batteries are 3,300 milliamps, and I get approximately 8 to 10 minutes of flight time with a 5-inch FPV with these batteries. They're a little bit over dimensioned, but something that I do like when I strap these onto a 5-inch is that it makes things smoother. It makes the entire drone a little bit more heavy, and it makes it easier to get those smooth lines and fly a little bit more cinematic. But they are mainly used for bigger drones, such as 7-inch drones. So make sure that you actually can strap these on to a 5-inch if you want to go with these batteries. But I've also tried the smaller ones as well, the 1550 batteries, and they work great, but you get somewhere around 4 to 5 minutes of flight time, and it feels a little bit less sturdy in the air. My drone of choice is a 5-inch drone. When I'm saying 5-inch, I don't mean the actual size of the drone. It's the size of the propeller, so that you know that. Because I thought it was the actual drone, but then I realized that 5 inches is oh. The reason that I like this is mainly because it's small, and you feel it when you're flying. You can get closer to things, you can get into tighter gaps, and all in all, better control of the drone when you're doing flips and flops and that kind of stuff. As a practice drone, it is very fun to use, and when you're flying cinematic, it's also great. It's durable. Shorter arms means that it's more sturdy than a 7-inch, for example. But when you're flying a 7-inch, you get a little bit more of an eagle feeling, and it's also more powerful because of the biggest thrust and bigger propellers. So that means you can cruise those big mountain ridges if you want. But this drone in particular from FPVframes.ch is also a long-range drone because you have 2 antennas here that's kind of strong, and it also has built-in GPS. But it all depends on what you're going to fly. If you're going to do a lot of acro stuff, a 5-inch is great. If you're going to do a lot of mountain ridge cruising, maybe look for a 7-inch. When it comes to the cameras on the drones, there's usually 2 different ones. So you also got to consider that when you're looking at a drone setup, because the O3 transmission unit is the same camera that is on the DJI Avata. And that is what you're actually seeing in the goggles. It is great. But if you want to make sure that you maintain the best image quality and get the most out of your FPV footage, I highly recommend you to go for the GoPro Hero 11 or the Hero 12. It totally depends on the latest GoPro, because the latest one is also the greatest one usually. The Hero 11 has a 7x8 sensor readout, which means that it is almost entirely square. So if you're shooting a lot for social media, then you can go into real steady and make sure that you stabilize your footage in both vertical and horizontal, depending on what you want to share the videos on. Cannot recommend this enough. Great camera, and I've used it for almost all my flights. When it comes to the ND filters, they are from Polar Pro. Kind of expensive side, but they've also worked very well. Very durable, even though I crashed with them a couple of times. But yeah, all in all, a great setup. There's a bunch of different options when it comes to micro SDs that you can purchase. This one that I got right here is a SanDisk Extreme, 128 gigabytes. It's a huge memory for any sort of drone nowadays. But the reason I have it is because what we talked about earlier, I forget to offload the memory cards onto my computer at times, and then I have this as a sort of a rescue. But I highly recommend you to get into the habit of offloading the memory cards. There's a couple of small numbers on the SD cards that you can see. You have the V30 and then A2. These are important when you're purchasing your SD cards, mainly because it's about how fast the SD card can write and read. So if you don't have a fast enough SD card, it's going to be hard for it to actually write the 4K material that you're capturing with your drone, and it's going to be slow reading or writing process, so that it's going to hang up. It's going to take some time to read the memory card when you put it into the computer. So make sure that your SD card says V30 and A2, because I've never had any issues with these SD cards. One of the factors that determines how you fly with your FPV drone is the camera angle that you have set before you actually take off. So in the front of the drone, you have the O3 air unit, which is usually set to an angle that you think is comfortable to fly with. To make it simple for you, if you have your camera angle tilted up just like that, then in order for the camera to be level with the ground, you need to tilt it forward like so. And that determines the factor. So the further up you put the camera, the further you have to push the drone to actually level the horizon and see more of what you're seeing. But there's also a downside with pushing it too far, is that you're losing thrust, because all the thrust is going to push the drone forward, but it's not giving it actual lift upwards. So trying to find a good angle on your actual air unit is crucial, and I found it to be somewhere between 25 to 30, not above that. A good friend of mine actually told me that the faster you can fly with the lower the camera angle, the better the pilot you're going to be. Flying FPV drones basically comes down to practice, because if you're anything like me and you come from flying regular, consumer drones such as DJI, Mavic 1, Mavic 2, Mavic 3, or the Mini series, then you're also used to all the fail-safe functions, so that when you start the drone, it starts to hover, it stays in place. When you release the sticks, it's there. When you're flying FPV, all of those things are on you to keep the drone in the air, to make sure you come in for landing, finding the right place to push the throttle, and all of those things. And that's why I talked about briefly how to use the controller in the simulator on your computer in order to get the stick feeling of actually flying the drone. One of the things that I spent a lot of time on was during the fall here in Sweden. It's very dark, and I thought, why not own a new skill and just sit there every single night for 1 hour, practice on flying FPV drones. And I spent over 100 hours in the simulator to this day just to practice and make sure that I feel comfortable with flying. You don't have to spend 100 hours though before you go out to fly, but make sure that you get the feeling of actually using sticks and understanding the physics of what it is that makes the drone fly the way that you want it to fly. Practicing in an open field is something that I highly recommend. No humans close by. Don't try to do those close gaps dives or fly through trees to begin with. Just get used to actually using the drone in an open area. Lines. That's what FPV is basically all about, at least in my opinion, because I like to fly cinematic. I like to find a nice line that I can practice on for 2-3 times until I get the right one to actually fly. Finding a line is gonna be kind of crucial to how good you are as a pilot. It comes down to your creativity of what you're seeing. When you are looking at a waterfall, do you see a couple of rocks that you can swoosh by to make the shot a little bit more interesting? Or do you see a gap that you can push through? Or do you see something that could make the entire thing come alive a little bit more? I remember a time when I was on Iceland together with my friend Terry, and there was this waterfall that I was seeing, and I thought to myself, well, I could fly just up to the waterfall's top and then dive down and then cruise back. But everyone else has already done that, I thought to myself. And I started way back and found this bridge that I could go under and then go up to the side of the waterfall and then down, dive it, and then cruise back, turn around, show the final shot again. And I think that finding those kind of lines to make it a little bit more cinematic and at the same time practicing on the framing that you see in the goggles is a crucial thing when it comes to flying FPV. When you're flying a line, don't push it too far. The further you push it, the riskier it's gonna get. I have crashed multiple times because I've pushed it too far. So if you feel satisfied with one of the shots, then that might be one of the shots that you should use, and just bring the drone back and then go back another day and test the line again. If you go back the next day, you have the practice from the first one already stored in your head so that you know that, okay, maybe this time I know where to push the throttle a little bit more so that I don't crash into the water or into a stone or a rock or whatever it might be. Try not to get too cocky because crashing can be expensive. Aj, aj, aj. Nu måste jag ställa mig upp. Min röv! Kolla här vet du. Ser du det? Helt blöt. I'm trying to find a nice line where I can reveal this waterfall and then sort of like follow all the way down, and if I can, go through the bridge that is down there. One thing that is very important when you're trying to find this is location. You gotta be able to see your drone at all times, or make sure that the signal is bouncing between the rocks when you're flying. Because if you're standing all the way up there and not seeing your drone down there, then you're gonna lose the connection. When you're trying to find the line, the initial line, try to see the visual line of sight of your drone and where you're going to fly. So whenever I'm taking off on a kind of unknown location where a little bit different, what I usually do is that I have it set to angle mode and not air mode, because then we can just start the drone, push the throttle, and then it's gonna slowly race up. And since we have clear skies, there's nothing obstructing us, it's gonna give us some time to get the drone up in the air, and then we can switch over to acro mode, okay? I have a feeling that I got a nice line that I can do. I'm gonna fly up to this mountain ridge here. It's kind of high. I think it's around 120 meters right now from where we are standing. I'm not entirely sure if this is gonna look good. Let's see. Okay, so we're coming down here. Just gonna give it a try. I'm gonna make sure that the drone is still in our line of sight. Oh, here we go. This is nice. Okay, sick. And then here, look, cruise the waterfall, down the river, and now the moment of truth. Oi, 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 oi! Ah, adrenalina, eh? And we're going back. Diving. Sick. Going along the river. And let's angle in. Nice, smooth flight. There we go. We got ourselves up here. And do a little bit of spin. Sick. And dive. Oh, dude. Oi, 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 oi. Wow. Yep. So this time around, I lowered the camera angle. I think it was 3 degrees. So we had a smoother flight than what I did yesterday. And it feels a lot better. Trying to bring the drone in close. Disarm. Shoo! Yeah! Woohoo! Yeah! Look at that! Ay, ay, ay! A couple of more centimeters and it would slip down. Try to have a couple of more batteries with you, because this time it felt good. It always does when you're getting close with FPV and you're like in the moment, looking through the goggles, making sure that you're not crashing, but might not look the way that you want. So always, when you're back with your drone, look through the footage and see if you need to power up another battery. Sometimes when you do, you're pushing it a little bit too far, but sometimes it's needed. I want to do another run, so I might just do. One of the things that I do whenever I have had a good run and I want to send it up again is that I exchange the memory card in the GoPro. So I have the footage from the GoPro in case there would be a crash. Men, jag tror vi kör ett batteri till.
Ja.